The Process Podcast, breaking down the daily habits, processes, and tools of high achievers. Now, here's your host, Brad Wilson.
Hey there, boys and girls. Welcome to the Process Podcast. This is your host, Brad Wilson. As always, if you haven't taken a moment yet to subscribe, please click that little button. It would mean a ton to me. You can also head to mentallyinvincible.com/theprocess and join our email newsletter to keep up to date with all of the latest episodes. Today on The Process, I have with me Dave Hollis. Earlier this year, Dave, despite the advice of his mentors, which is kind of a theme for Dave's career, quit his job as the head of worldwide distribution at a little company you may have heard of, Disney, in order to become the CEO of the Hollis Company, formerly Chic Media. The Hollis Company is the enterprise that Dave's wife, Rachel, has painstakingly nurtured and grown for the last decade. Now, I know you might be imagining a balance scale in your mind's eye, thinking Disney, Hollis Co. Disney, Hollis Co. But in case you aren't familiar with Rachel's work, let's dive in a little. Her book, Girl, Wash Your Face, has sold over 1 million copies, and she's the host of not one but two of the top podcasts in the world, very jealously, I might say. The Rise podcast and the Rise Together podcast that Dave co-hosts with her. Her audience is in the millions and millions. She's a house of fire with audacious goals like being the female Tony Robbins and filling the shoes of Oprah, that when you listen to her speak and feel the passion with which she teaches and lifts her audience up, you can't help but believe they'll come to fruition. With that in mind, it's easy for me to see why Dave has so much love and passion for helping to grow the Hollis Company. And as he very firmly believes, and we discuss in depth in our conversation together, as human beings, we only experience growth in areas of life where we are less certain. So to anybody out there listening who's on solid ground and considering wading into choppy waters that might be fraught with risk, I can promise you one thing about the experience, that whatever it is, you will grow from it and come out on the other side an improved version of yourself. In my conversation with Dave, we discuss Dave's career path through Disney and transition to the Hollis Company, how his experience dealing with the foster care system has given him and Rachel a lifelong pursuit, how the Hollises stay amazing parents despite chasing legendarily massive goals, and much more. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Dave Hollis. Dave, I'm so thankful and grateful to have you here, to be having this conversation. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and hopefully we give the listeners here something that they can take away and apply to their life.
I think we will.
So
the name of this podcast is The Process. And for me at the beginning, it was an exploration of what extraordinary people, the actions they're taking in the 24 hours they have in a day. You know, what exactly are they doing? But upon reflection of talking to these, incredible people and sensing their energy and their passion, the gas that drives what their pursuit of in life is their why. And I want to start first at Disney. How old were you when you first started there? And what was your why when you first started working for the mouse?
So I was 26 coming into the Walt Disney Company. I had attended school at Pepperdine University. I went almost immediately into Hollywood, worked at Fox, had a variety of jobs. And through serendipity, a few connections, and a good call from a headhunter one day in 2001, showed up at the Walt Disney Company working in a product management role, working on packaged media, DVDs at the time, and started what would end up being a 17-year career during which in the first 10 years, I had 10 different jobs. And at the end of which I had a single job for 7 years that was great until it wasn't. And the until it wasn't part ultimately became a catalyst for wholesale change of life and chasing mission with my wife and a new thing that we're now doing together.
Why did you have 10 different jobs in 10 years?
I came into the company working in a role that was a little bit of an afterthought for the broader business. I was a brand manager for Miramax that at the time was making smaller movies against the broader portfolio of everything that Disney was working on. And about a year in, I realized that I, as the product manager for Miramax, had the most knowledge about and probably the most passion for why individual retailers like Walmart and Best Buy, Target, should take the packaged media that came out of the Miramax brand. And so I took the initiative to go to a person who headed sales at the time and represented how I thought I could be an asset for his sales team. That if he were to put me on the road, that with my deeper knowledge of the product and my passion for the stuff I was working on, could take it off their plate. And in doing so, would help them achieve their sales goals. And in doing so, would help me achieve my goals of making the product we were working on sell as well as it possibly could. That led to a chance to move to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and become a salesperson myself. I did that for about a year until the next door came knocking, and a technology that was being deployed was the next thing up as a thing that maybe Dave could take a look at. And at that point, I'd already, in a personal branding kind of way, established myself as a guy who was willing to jump into spaces that were not necessarily about what the resume lent itself to, but to how he, as a kind of strong utility player, could step into and maybe make a difference. It was a job, the third job I had was for this technology that was destined to fail. But what
was the technology?
So the technology was something at the time called EZD. It was disposable DVDs.
I remember those.
Right? So you open the package, there's a chemical on the back. 48 hours into having opened the package, the chemical makes the disc not playable, and Mission Impossible style, it's gone. And here's the headline. I was in a job where I'm in Minneapolis, where Best Buy and Target are located. I'm working on these big retail accounts. I'm a younger salesperson relative to the balance of the field. And from a what makes most sense logically standpoint, staying in that job and working in that role would have been the thing. But I was asked by a person who I respected, who I knew had a future at the company, who was looking for someone to take a chance on something that was uncertain. And it gave me the opportunity to move back to California, where my, at the time, girlfriend, now wife, was living. And so I jumped into this, less conventional space against the advice of my mentors, against the kind of common sense logic of what was likely to be best longevity-wise. And sure enough, about a year in, this technology did not work. In not working, it left me exposed as the person who couldn't make it work. But because of my willingness to jump in and do this thing, it led me to the next job, another job where, hey, he doesn't have perfect experience, but he's shown himself to be a guy who can show up in anything we throw him into and figure it out fast enough. I went into a non-traditional business development kind of role. It led to a retail marketing role, which led to a trade marketing role. I mean, each step was another one of these, hey, you know what, let's take a chance on this guy who's shown himself to, thrive in environments where he doesn't necessarily understand all of the aspects of the business, asks good questions, and can apply Band-Aids in places where they are needed. And 10 years of that, 10 years, 11 bosses, 10 jobs, a lot of change. It was great for personal, kind of ADD, professional ADD, as it were. But it also rounded a set of skills that when an opportunity to be in a business strategy kind of role, I was able to step into the theatrical space and attempt to do something that was inevitably going to be received by the customers inside of theatrical in a way that, was going to make them upset. But I was just young enough, naive enough, and cocky enough, honestly, that I walked in and told them that the time that a movie goes in theaters to the time that it's available at retail was going to shrink from 4 months to 3 months, the window, And in having survived that without being murdered, I was then asked if I would work inside of theatrical. And so I finished my last 7 years at Disney as ultimately the head of distribution, the president of distribution on the theatrical sales side, putting movies into theaters. A good job, but ultimately by the end, because of having Star Wars and Avengers, not the hardest job in the entire world. And
maybe not the hardest job, but it's kind of a big deal. When people think about it in their heads, they think head of distribution worldwide, Disney, and the brands that they have, Pixar, all the different things. You think, wow, like that seems like a lot. I want to go back to something that you said that I think is kind of a theme from our conversations. Why did you go against your mentor's advice as a younger man and say, you know what, this is what I feel I must do? What was your thought process going through that?
Well, I mean, I have real clarity on it now because I can recognize it as a very conscious thing that I choose every day, which is this tie that exists between growth and fulfillment, and that growth only happens in places where there's less certainty. And so I have, either because of having had great coaches or some, the blessing of some good talent, but whatever it might be, I have figured things out in different parts of my career pretty quickly. And so the idea of jumping into some part of the business that I didn't have expertise in was always an appealing thing because of the ability to have to learn, and probably a little bit like the motivation that came from trying to prove that I was worthy of the job that I wasn't necessarily on paper qualified for. And so I was always choosing things that maybe didn't make as much conventional sense. And I, by the way, also accepted plenty of responsibilities during those 10 jobs that I wasn't on the surface totally excited about coming in. But it was only after I'd completed the assignment or was transitioning to the next job that I could fully appreciate why it was that I was given the opportunity to do that thing, whether it was about learning a new part of the business or being exposed to and surrounded by a new set of people that ultimately became connections for years and years to come.
Now, the mentors that were guiding your career, tell me about their thoughts. And I'm sure that you sought out some wisdom of other people before making a ginormous decision of joining the Hollis Company, becoming the CEO. What was their feedback on that decision? Do you care to talk about that, Al?
Of course. I mean, so I became the head of distribution. I'll just back up just for a second. I became the head of distribution, right? Like 7 years or so ago. So here it is, 2001. No. Yes. 2011.
Yeah.
So it's 2011, and the company has not terribly long ago acquired Pixar. Almost immediately upon my taking this head of sales role, we acquire Marvel. And then only because I asked nicely, they then went and acquired Lucasfilm.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you for asking. Thank you for delivering.
Besides Han Solo, sorry.
Right. So I've gone from the first couple years of this role being the most exhilarating in my professional life, where every room I walk into, I am the least experienced person. I've become comfortable in my maturity as a professional to ask questions rather than represent that I actually know what I'm talking about. I have, because I've brought my team, who is the best in the business, as the experts in almost every conversation to the table to represent points of view, had them build a trust with me that didn't have them rolling their eyes as much with most of the questions that I'm asking. And as time goes by, I'm figuring out the business. Good news, yay for this. As the Marvel business is now introduced as a part of, the portfolio of brands that we're working on, and then as the Lucas brand is ultimately added as well, the negotiation that a person is having to have as the head of sales with movie theaters who need good movies and big movies changes dramatically when you have the ability to take Disney Animation, Pixar, Lucas, and Marvel as a part of how you go have a conversation. So when I started having these conversations with my wife about us partnering in the future of the Hollis Company, This was something that did not make sense to a single person that I worked with, and in fact was not a conversation that I had with anybody at the Walt Disney Company for a very, very long period of time. And once I did, it was honestly met with, "Are you okay? Should we get you professional help? Have you lost your mind?" Right? Because it is a great job. It's the greatest company. I had the opportunity to work with the greatest storytellers. I had the benefit of bosses that I not only respected, but who respected me, and had a team that is, again, just like bar none, the best in the business. But because of the combination of factors, it wasn't a thing that was fully tapping the potential that I had. And because of it not being as challenging as it had been at the beginning of me getting the assignment, I was miserable. And I remember the day sitting out back in our backyard. We had a pool at the time. And each night, I have young kids, we would do a question and answer session where my three boys were given carte blanche on any question that they could come up with. And my middle son, who was 7 or so at the time, asked the question, "What are you most afraid of?" And my answer, he's looking for tarantulas and spiders, and he's looking for scorpions, tarantulas, right? Like something really scary in his mind. And what falls out of my mouth is that I'm not going to live up to my potential. And it became like the manifestation of my greatest fear is playing out in real time as the company continues to produce just the greatest run in the history of Hollywood. And I don't have to work as hard to get the accolades, the records, the benefit of the doubt with my team or with the customers that I'm trying to convince to take the product. So I made this decision with my wife in somewhat a vacuum, because talking to people about it, for the most part, was met with this, like, "You're out of your mind." And then you have to decide, are you going to let other people not understanding your decision keep you from taking a leap? And for a long time, they're wanting me to live inside of a construct that made sense to them kept me from doing something that ultimately produced a fulfillment that now, 120 days in, I wish I'd made, the jump earlier and not given as much weight to their opinion earlier, because it's been the best professional decision I've ever made.
And how is working with Rachel? How is that helping you to live up to your potential as a human being?
So my wife, her name is Rachel Hollis. She lives inside of self-help is a strange word, because there is some taboo, I think, around it, especially for men at times. But she lives inside of a space, and we as a company are operating in a world where the mission is to place tools in the hands of human beings, primarily women, but humans, that will help them make lasting life change. And so she has written a book called Grow Wash Your Face. She has become, as a speaker, a person who stands on stage, not as a cheerleader, though she is encouraging, but as a coach who is going to hold you accountable and push you into spaces that will force you to look at yourself in the mirror, rise to an occasion, and expect more from your life. And she did the very same thing with me. I'd love to say that I just woke up one day and I decided, you know what, I need to leave the Walt Disney Company because I'm miserable and it's producing a less great version of me at home. But really what happened is Rachel waded into a tough conversation with me about 2 years before I left the Walt Disney Company and started asking bigger questions about whether or not I was going to show up for my life. That's a hard thing to have to necessarily do. But those hard conversations were the beginning of what ultimately led to us in June of 2018, just 4 months ago, moving our family from Los Angeles to Austin, Texas, moving our team that at the time was called Chic Media and is now the Hollis Company, to Austin, Texas. And in doing so, take advantage of everything that this book of hers, that these live events that she's doing, that some apparel that she's launching, like all of this stuff is happening. And in a weird way, it feels like the universe is rising to meet us, having had confidence in and believing in the conceit that if we were to go chase putting tools in people's hands that might make their lives better, that there actually is a market for it. what was interesting and what has been maybe the hardest part of it that now is just beautiful and feels a little more natural is the commodity that Rachel trades in is authenticity and transparency, right? So she's written a book that is about 20 lies that women have believed, that she had believed. And in believing those lies, they kept her from being the best version of herself. Well, in telling 20 chapters worth of stories about the things that weren't great in her life, she talked about the beginning of our relationship where I was a jerk. She talked about our sex life and it not being ideal for a stretch of time after we had kids. She talked about her challenges with alcohol when she was struggling with anxiety. She talked about a lot of things. I was, managing optics and trying to, perpetuate this everything's fine life of ours, and I think against the backdrop of this Facebook, Instagram world that we live in, it's hard to not want to also keep up with the Joneses and tell everybody that everything's just fine. But what's broken through and connected is her going first and telling these stories. And in me joining the company, I'm also coming along and being comfortable, being uncomfortable in my own sharing of the insecurities that we as men also struggle with, the lies that we as men also tell ourselves, these limiting beliefs that keep us from being the better version of ourselves.
And I want to make a comment here to something that you mentioned in our pre-call about, sort of a fear that Rachel has, or that y'all have talked about, is that, this thing that she's been building for such a long time, her, putting her authentic self out there, building a community, resonating with people, that maybe there's this thought that, that you get more credit than you might deserve for when she's already exploded, let's be real here. But when she hits the stratosphere, the moon becomes, fulfills one of her audacious goals as being, filling the shoes of Oprah or being, the woman, Tony Robbins, right?
Yep.
And I thought a lot about that. And I firstly, I just want to say the thought to me, quite frankly, is it's a little absurd because in my opinion, being somebody who's building something and being in a place of year one, right? And Rachel's in year 10. There's this iceberg. There's all these things. I see somebody who reached year 10 as having just an iron will, just a very strong, driven person. And I think that, the reality is, you benefit from her 10 years of doing these things. She plugs you right in the community and also gives you her trust, which allows her audience to trust you as well. So your benefit is massive, massive, massive from being plugged in to the Hollis Company. And, I think it's incredible. I think that what you're doing, that authenticity, saying hey, this is life. Life is problems. And we all have similar problems as human beings, and now let's work our way through them. I love what you're doing. It resonates with me so much. And I'll tell you, and we've talked about this openly before, so I'm not speaking out of school, but the conversation around working together is one that we've been having for years, probably 3 or 4 years worth of time. The conversation around how we would work together is something that we really were diving into 2 or so years ago. The idea that I would come in as the CEO to a company that she founded and has for 10 years shepherded and grown and invested every single dollar that the company made back into growing the company, that I might lead this company at a time when it was just at the cusp of tipping into all of the things that are now working in both podcasts doing well and the live events selling out and the book doing, more than 1 million units in 7 months and all the things, was probably one of the hardest professional things for her to ever do because of, as she would confess herself, the ego wrapped in ego wrapped in, yes, me maybe having some attribution for the success that is 10 years in the making and not, 4 months in the making. Right? It's your life pursuit.
100%. 100%, but separately that there's something too in the fact that she is a she's a proud woman who has done great things. And the idea that a man's going to come in and have to like take this from where it is to where it's going to go was, I think, a thing that she was struggling with. And then we sat and had hard conversations with other people who themselves as couples have successfully run businesses. And the bottom line was, if the mission is impact, let's define where strengths exist in this relationship. And Rachel's strength is creating unbelievably great content. My strength is more on the business side. I'm not the creative person as much as I am, let's make deals, figure out how to take the content and make it work on as many platforms as possible. So we went through an exercise of defining lanes. And when she really like kind of sat in, and when we collectively sat in, well, what would it mean for you to be CEO, Dave? And what would that then take off of my plate? What it ended up landing us at was this beautiful place where, oh wait, I didn't want to do the P&L. I didn't want to worry about hiring a staff. I didn't want to have to negotiate the deals. I don't want to deal with our lawyer. I do want to work on, right, every other thing that's inside of the creative space, which is, by the way, what this company is. We're just a creative content company that's trying to put tools in people's hands to make their lives better. She gets to focus on that, and the ability to now pull herself away from the things that were a distraction allows her to create greater content, better content, and have the content come out more frequently.
Right. And you complement each other. And I think it's incredible that you're able to have these honest conversations with one another to dispel the fear, to dispel maybe some false assumptions that maybe you were going to make that could have held you back, but instead you dealt with it, you dispelled it, and now everything is, ready to go, ready to roll.
By the way, I don't for one second take any pleasure in or would ever want to like dismiss or take credit in some way for the work that was done before June 1st. I mean,
absolutely not.
She is a hustler's hustler. She's up before the sun and has, 6 or 7 books in and as many, hours of content that she's created. She deserves every single bit of what's happening today, and that I get to walk in now and try and, partner with her in helping bring a message that she's putting out in the world to as many people as possible. It's an honor and a joy, but our success is a reflection of her work. And I'm super, super excited and happy about all that.
Hey there, all you loyal The Process podcast listeners. I just wanted to take a moment to talk to you about a book that I created earlier this year called A Thoughtful Gift, Reflections on Our Love. And I created it because I want to do my part in helping people fully express their love for one another. It's something that gives me joy and fulfillment in my own life. And I have to admit that as I created the pages and had them illustrated, and when I held this tangible thing I had made from my brain in my hands, I had some skepticism as to whether or not it would do what I wanted it to do. Maybe skepticism is the wrong word. I had some fear, some anxiety over it. So my wife and I, we sat down together. We went through the book, and I have to say that I did a pretty damn good job. It was just an amazing night spent with her, exploring how we'd given each other strength, how we'd shown each other love, what we've helped one another overcome. And it allowed us to verbally express some things that maybe we had kept inside, maybe things that don't come up organically. And I have very, very, very happy memories making that book with her. And I just looked back through it, and it made me smile. It just did the things that I wanted it to do when I had the initial idea. So because A Thoughtful Gift is my baby, and it was built specifically to increase the intimacy of the most important relationship in your life, if you buy the book and you aren't more than satisfied, I demand that you ask for a refund. I don't want to hoodwink you by any stretch of the imagination. I think that it'll be an amazing night that gives you happy memories for many years to come. And if it's not that, if it's not everything that I'm saying it will be, here, have your money back. If you're not happy, I'm not happy. So to buy A Thoughtful Gift, you can head to athoughtfulgiftbook.com. There's also a link on mentallyinvincible.com, but primarily athoughtfulgiftbook.com. Now, back to the show. I would be greatly disappointed if you did want credit. You're her strongest supporter, her ambassador. And as a husband, that's what I think we need to be doing for our partners, our spouses. We need to be their biggest supporter. We need to give them all the credit that they rightfully deserve.
Yep.
So let's transition a little. How, in the midst of all these things, the pursuing of these audacious goals, how do you manage to stay exceptional parents while at the same time, pursuing those?
Yeah, so we have 4 kids. We have been the foster parents of 4 kids. We have had, so that's like 1,008 kids, basically, is how many kids that is. So we, we try our best to be as present as we possibly can, and have become comfortable modeling that our pursuit of this mission that we feel like we've been called into by our Creator is a thing that they also ought to have as a part of how they grow up. It's the only version of parents that they've ever had. Their childhood is the only childhood that they've ever had. So their experience in all of this is unbelievably normal. And I answer that because Rachel she happens to be traveling today. We both, for this job, are intermittently on the road doing this work. And as much as it, requires a community of people to help us when it comes to keeping our children fed and, taken to or dropped off from school if we happen to be out of town, we're really deliberate about quality time when quality time is afforded. And we're also comfortable knowing that some of how these kids will grow up, watching us pursue big dreams or watching us sacrifice some of the things that normal people, normal parents have, is a part of why they're going to be who they are when they ultimately grow up. We went through this experience this summer, which was really informing. It was really helpful, and it formed a way of us thinking differently about how we put challenge in front of our kids. We sent them to camp. And we'd never sent them to camp before. We just didn't grow up in a community where camps for summer were a thing. And here we moved on June 1st to Texas, and camps apparently are a thing here.
What kind of camp?
A sleepaway goodbye for 3 weeks consecutively. Looks like an Adam Sandler movie set. Okay. So in dropping them off at this camp, we're having this is this the right choice kind of conversation, I think, in our head. And then as soon as they're out of the car, definitely on the drive home. Because it felt like a long period of time for 10, 8, and 6-year-old boys to be gone from us. And then we read this book called Homesick and Happy. And it talked about the importance of putting your kids in positions to have to overcome risk and adversity in safe situations. The idea that they're becoming a stronger, autonomous version of themselves because of you not being there every single second to entertain them, take care of them, or make sure that they don't take a responsible risk. They came back after 3 weeks worth of time, changed people. And it has now informed how we send them outside to go figure out how to find adventure on their own, use their imagination on their own. And as much as I think that's maybe the way that you or I may have grown up, society is just different today. And the way that I think parenting has evolved has unfortunately created somewhat of a helicopter parenting mentality that compromises kids' ability to go out and figure out who they are without the help of mom or dad being there to take care of every need that they have. It's a long way of also coming back to the original question, right? We are intentional on the weekends with the kind of time that we spend, but we're also rules-oriented. There's very limited amount of technology that happens in our house. We're crazy about them getting up at the same time every day. We're really mindful of what they eat. And we do the very best that we can, knowing that our life's a little bit unconventional with the kind of travel we have or the kind of work that, every once in a while pulls us away from us being there as regularly as we'd like.
How were they changed when they came back from camp?
Well, one, just having boys in the presence of other young men who could help reinforce some of the things that I, as a father, am trying to instill on them, I think were received in a way that, it's an interesting thing. There's this pride that you have in thinking that you are solely responsible for shaping the humans that you create or adopt, because we have an adopted human. But as it turns out, sometimes the things that my kids needed when it came to respecting people who are older than them was seeing it modeled by younger men who happen to be camp counselors, right? The idea that I would never let my kids climb to a tree branch that was higher than a certain elevation, but this camp was, with a harness on, having them climb to the top of a pirate ship that they've constructed, changed the way that they were thinking about responsible risk. And so their willingness then, as they returned home to our house, we got a bit of a yard here in Texas, they could go explore and chase things into brush that, honestly, as their dad, I would have been like, oh, hold on. You don't want to go in the brush unless you got your tall boots. And listen, I don't want letters from people telling me about the dangers of brush, but I want my kids to make, a little bit of adventure in their life so that they can make some mistakes, not irrevocable mistakes, but mistakes that let them learn and grow into this version of who I hope they become because of having taken some chances. And that camp environment really teed them up for becoming a little more confident in and comfortable with who they could be without us as parents being there every second of the day.
I love that. And I can see it being such a powerful experience. And there's a sterility. I mean, let's be honest about life and growing up. There's all these fears, all these things. As a parent, you want to helicopter, right? It's your instinct to helicopter. But I read a quote the other day that said, it's cheesy, but ships are safe in the harbor, but that's not where they're meant to be.
Oh, I'm in. That's my favorite quote. Are you kidding me? It's not cheesy. I'm getting that. I have one tattoo. It has the word ally. My next tattoo is that quote. I mean, I love that quote because it defines, yes, what I hope for my children, but it also defines the last year of my life. I could have very easily stayed working at the Walt Disney Company for the next 25 years, provided handsomely for my family, had the, envy's a weird word, but at least the respect of the business that I was working inside of, getting to work at the number one studio with the number one brands. And I didn't have to try because that was the harbor. There were no waves there. Getting out of the harbor was the point of life for me in this last year worth of time. And honestly, as much as it's about my own personal growth, I think of it too against the lens of how my kids will tell stories of what I modeled during this transition from certainty to uncertainty. I'm certain that we're going to go chase and be successful in so many of the things that we're trying to pursue in this new venture of ours. But I'm not totally certain how to do most of the things that we're attempting to do. And I know, as much as, I clung to certainty as the commodity of my life for years and years and years, that the only way I can truly grow is by pushing myself into this less comfortable space. Being vulnerable on stage, we just came off of a 2-day couples conference, being vulnerable on stage for a couple of days, talking about things that nobody talks about in relationship is super uncomfortable for me, having worn a suit for 17 years inside of a corporate environment. But the last couple of days were life-giving because that uncertainty, as much as I was anxious and uncomfortable, I learned more about myself. I grew in helping dispense some tools. And I'm now, I think, modeling, again, for my children, the importance of not playing it safe, of taking chances, of taking that job for the certain to fail technology because of what might come from learning in that failure, instead of having a stigma against failure as being a bad thing. Any of the success that we're experiencing, any of Rachel's success over 10 years, it's not that she's succeeded time and time again. She has stacked failures on top of each other and now stands on top of those failures instead of buried beneath them.
Yeah, it's something that I inadvertently has shaped my life, is avoiding, I don't want to be safe either. I think that as a 19-year-old man, becoming a professional poker player was not something that my family growing up in Tennessee looked upon super favorably as a real possibility, but it was exciting. It was an adventure. I remember putting all my stuff in my car, driving to Florida, and it was an adventure, right? And, you're on an adventure that's exciting and fun, and taking the long view, looking 30 years from now, 40 years from now, these are the stories that people will remember. These are the stories you'll tell people. It's very, very, very exciting. Okay, so I want to take a moment. And by the way, you do have a lot of kids. I think you have so many kids, in fact, that you could add one, and you may not even notice that. I want to talk about foster care, choosing to be foster parents, because it's something that means a lot to me. My grandparents were foster parents. I have 2 foster uncles that they adopted themselves, and a lot of times foster kids have gone through really horrifying life conditions that impact them emotionally. You have all of these different challenges that you have to deal with. Could you tell me, firstly, why you and your wife had it on your heart to be foster parents, and secondly, some of the unexpected benefits of having these kids in your lives?
Yep. Well, first, I'm going to ruin the setup by saying we did not plan on being foster parents. So we went into an adoption journey that just didn't go the way that we planned, and found our way into foster care. We originally just felt a calling that, hey, we had 3 boys and we wanted to have a girl, but instead of having a girl through biological means, let's go ahead and adopt. We started on a path of international adoption. We, for a little more than a year, were working with Ethiopia, and that program, because of a whole host of stuff, closed down. And in the aftermath of it closing, we decided to just go where need was. There was a lot of need in our backyard. We went to the county of Los Angeles and went through the program to adopt. And as a prerequisite of adopting, you have to go through 75 or so hours of parenting classes. Seemed terribly normal for people who had 3 living children, but that's okay. In the 74th hour, they told us, hey, by the way, you're going to need to foster before you can adopt from the county of Los Angeles, as a part of, I think, helping a little bit of an emergency need that they have for foster parents. So we felt a little bit like, hey, you know what? This is life showing up for us this way. We're going to foster. Let's do this thing. I got a phone call in April of 2016 that a 11-month-old baby was available and ready, and would we take this baby into our home? And because we knew that we had to foster before we were going to be able to adopt, we said yes right away. And unbelievably, 20 minutes later, baby shows up with a pillowcase full of stuff, and they just hand the baby to you and say goodbye, thank you very much. And now you have a baby in your house. So we went from having 3 kids to 4 kids. We got a call the next day or the day after that her 22-month-old sister was also in care, was at a holding facility of some kind, and they asked if we would take her as well. And so we said, yeah, you know what, we will. We have the circle of resources to help keep these people alive and happy. And you know what, our kids are game for this. Let's do it. So we went from a family of 5 to a family of 7 in a 2-day period of time. We had these kids for a, 3 or 4 month window. They came with their 11-month and 22 months worth of trauma. So they'd been in other homes. We went to, in and out of visitation with their biological parents, and got exposed to the beauty of being available to these kids when they needed people the most, and the tragedy that their experience was built on top of, and a system and its brokenness that wasn't necessarily totally there to protect their family, our family, or anything really, generally speaking. So we finished our experience with our first 2 placements. The parents rehabilitated themselves. They were sent back to their parents. And then we got a phone call about 3 months later about a pair of twins that were available for adoption because they'd been left at the hospital by a mother who'd given birth and abandoned them. And so at 5 days old, we went to the hospital, picked up twin baby girls. Twins are no joke. They happened to have some drugs in their system, so we had to wean them off of drugs. We named these babies. We took them home. And we, again, we're a family of 7 and went through what was, some really tough time of adjusting to, just having these little babies in our house, but ultimately also the surprise after about 8 weeks of having them that there was a biological family member that was fighting for custody in the background. And so they went from being adoptable to not being adoptable. And that white van showed back up at our house and heartbreakingly took them from our house to a person in their biological family. Needless to say, hard story. And we ended up transitioning out of the foster care / public adoption, county adoption system into independent adoption. Afterwards, our story had a happy ending in that we adopted a daughter not terribly long after the twins left. But foster care for us has become the philanthropy that we will spend the most of our time and most of our money on for the rest of our lives, because we're board members of a charity called National Angels. It was originally started here in Austin as Austin Angels, and it's a nonprofit that really just sends people around the families who are foster parents and ultimately the kids themselves to try and reduce the number of transitions that these kids have and to try and create some consistency for the kids from one transition to the next. So foster care, it's heartbreaking. It really, really is heartbreaking. The people who feel called into that space, I have just unbelievably huge respect for. And I know that we will fight for the entirety of our life to try and make a system that is broken better, because these kids need it.
And you guys have such big hearts, and that's such an amazing thing to pursue. Having exposure to the broken system led you to devoting essentially the rest of your lives to giving back and helping to improve the system and improve the lives of these little kids. And like I said, my grandmother she's 77 now, and I talked to her just a few days ago, and she was taking the sister of one of my foster uncles around looking for a job. She's 77. It's something, it goes on your entire life. It just doesn't, the
heartbreaking thing, like for people who don't appreciate the magnitude of the challenge, the number of kids in the foster system right now could fill the stadium that the Super Bowl will be played at this year 4 times over. When people age out of the system within 6 months, 50% find themselves human trafficked, on drugs, dead. Like the stats are staggering, and the work that can be done to come alongside the public agencies is the work that we're going to do. And so hopefully, if you're interested in any way, I'd love to give a shout out to this group that we work with, because they're doing great work. They're called National Angels, and you should check them out. But if not, find someone locally who's doing some good work. If you feel called into being a foster parent, my one piece of advice would really be find other people who have been themselves foster parents so that you can create community and understand what it is that you're getting into. Because for at least in our experience and those that we were in community with, it's a lot. It's a lot. Now, the beautiful thing is, out of our experience, my sister is fostering 3 children who she will adopt officially very, very shortly. Rachel's sister is currently fostering a baby that, knocking on wood, she will adopt shortly. So there's beauty in having had this hard season of our life exist. And the best thing that could have come out of the season was it was the first time in our entire, at least for me, in my entire adult life, where we chose uncertainty over and over and over again. And it was the first time as an adult where I'd really just decided, hey, let's just keep doing this thing, because foster care is an uncertain thing. And the way that our marriage grew stronger for having to be in that bunker together, the way that our biological children grew some resiliency, and we were, shown how much they could endure, that our faith was really tested for the first time. And, you say you have faith, and then you get a test like surviving something like twins leaving your house unexpectedly. it was a great thing to have faith tested for the proof that it, existed all along. So there were so many great things fruit-wise that came in pushing ourselves into that space. And I encourage, it doesn't need to be foster care, but whatever your version of reaching for something uncertain, that's where growth lives.
Yeah, uncertainty leads to growth. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you and your wife had to go through that. I think I just can't imagine it myself.
Here's the thing. I appreciate it, but I'm not sorry. I'm grateful that it happened. I don't want to go through it again. Trust me. Like, I do not have any interest in reliving 2016. But when I'm 80 and someone says, what's one of the most important years of your entire life? 2016 and how hard it was is going to be one of those sliding doors. You could have stayed on track A, or you could have just, moved to track B kind of years. And I'm forever going to be grateful for it. I'm forever going to be, mourning what could have been in, a world where we had twins. But I have the greatest daughter, period. I mean, I'll put her up against any daughter in the world. And she exists as a byproduct of a process that didn't work as we thought it was going to. So it worked exactly as it was supposed to, even if in the moment it didn't feel like it was working out, well.
And a lot of things that happen in life, I feel, there's the opportunity for gratitude based on the experiences that we learn. Like you said, we don't want to go through them every day or ever again, but there's gratitude to be found. There's growth. And that growth can spring from some not so good things happening in life.
Yeah, my wife says this a lot, and I steal her lines a lot because she says a lot of good things a lot. But the question you have to ask yourself, is life happening to you or is life happening for you? And I fundamentally came out of the experience of this loss and this, test, believing that all of that happened for us, that it made our marriage stronger, it made our kids stronger, it made our faith stronger. And so I'm grateful for it, even though it was wrapped in pain. And so now anything that comes our way, come at me, bro. I'm not, I'm not interested in going that low, but if it were to show up, I think there's a way for me to approach it through a gratitude lens of how on the other side of whatever it is that we're experiencing, we're going to be stronger for having to go through it.
Perspective is paramount in the human experience. Okay, so let's go to the lightning round.
All right.
Let's that may not be so lightning-y, but we'll see. Dave, what's something that people might be surprised that you think you're horrible at?
I am horrible at cooking, but maybe they wouldn't be surprised about that. I am horrible at basketball. I'm 6'4", and I always am asked, do you play? No, I do not play. Just because you're tall, doesn't mean you can play.
Do you play any sports or just the?
I played soccer for a ton of years, but I was invited by some of my high school soccer buddies 3 years ago to come back and play in an alumni game.
Yeah.
And I was so excited to relive the magic, and the magic is dead. So no, I do not play anything any longer. Thank you.
No more magic.
No, my wife and I run. We love to run. We've done many half marathons. My wife is a marathon runner herself, so we love to run. But other than that, I don't even know if that's a sport. There's no sporting.
On relationships, what's something that people focus a lot of time and attention on that maybe doesn't give them any results?
I mean, for a long time with Rachel, and I think we were a little bit paired this way, worrying about keeping each other happy kept us from having conversations that could actually provoke real growth in our relationship. That now that we've realized that it's not our job to keep each other happy, that sometimes going through the thing that they're going through is exactly what they need, even if it's not the exact thing that they want, and has been really important for us both to come to, especially now that we're working together every day. And so being there to be supportive in the midst of a time where they're struggling through something is different than trying to fix it. So I've been a fixer, and yet there are times when the want for me to be the hero of our relationship shows up, but it's not necessarily productive in the same way as sometimes just being there to listen and be supportive. That's sometimes all they need.
A distillation. What to you is your job in a relationship? If it's not to make the other person happy, what is the goal, the purpose?
I mean, we are best friends more than we are almost anything else. I mean, yeah, we like to make out, and I'm like certainly, her biggest cheerleader, but like our friendship shows up in like normal ways. Hey, we're going to make each other laugh by sending silly memes back and forth. But it also shows up as, like me being there as an ear to listen or a support to give a hug after a day that didn't go exactly as she planned. So, I think I'm, and we both are, like, we're both in this to be each other's biggest supporter and best friend first. And, on that foundation, every other thing that we're chasing and all of the, romantic making out kind of stuff that lives in our life too is a springboard off of that foundation that we stand on.
And going back to what you said, I'm a fixer as well. And that's probably my biggest mistake in communication is when faced with a problem, I, like a machine gun, am offering 5 solutions to the potential problem that I see it. When a lot of times, like in my last episode, we talked about emotional validation and how people, they firstly want their emotions to be validated, why they're feeling fear, why they're feeling anxious. They don't want all those fixing solutions. They're not going to be receptive to them. Put in that way, which is a horrible way that I've gone about my life up until, recently learning and realizing, oh my God, I was trying to be helpful, but maybe I wasn't being as helpful as I thought I was being.
Yeah.
So have you ever strongly believed something in life only to reverse course later on? And if so, what led to that change of belief?
Oh man. I mean, I think about coming into our, like when we met, we both came out of pretty traditional upbringings where men had certain roles and women had certain roles, and the negotiation of how we lived together when we were married was something that was working against a little bit of muscle memory of the way we both were raised. And one of the things that I love most about my wife is her ambition and the fact that she knows that she's been placed on this planet to change it. And so some of what I came into our relationship thinking, I have crazy respect for women who stay home and raise kids. But I knew from a very early age, though I came out of an environment where that was how I was raised, and she came out of an environment where that was the way she was raised, that wasn't going to be the way that our house showed up. But that still didn't mean that I, every once in a while at the beginning of a relationship, wondered, she makes this joke all the time. Remember that fight we had where I had to ask you where shaving cream came from? And, you had no idea because you just assumed a fairy dropped it into the shower. No, it's as much, right? And so I have come to a place where it is as much my responsibility as it is hers to raise our children. If there's a doctor's appointment, it's as much my responsibility to get that shot taken care of as it is hers, just as it's as much her responsibility to provide for our family financially with the work we're doing as it is mine. And I didn't grow up necessarily thinking that way. And I'm excited about the work that we're doing, in part because her next book, shameless plug, is called Girl Stop Apologizing. It comes out in March. And it is basically this conversation, right? If you're a woman and you have a calling on your heart and you're still looking for permission from someone who has authority in your life, it could be your husband, it could be your mother-in-law, it could be society at large, stop wasting time and go chase the thing that God's put on your heart. And there's a version of this story that she's telling that now is cheerleader number one and advocate number one of it getting out in the world, that the 26-year-old version of me when we were first getting married didn't appreciate. And I'm so happy to have had in a partner someone who could change my perspective. I'll give you another example. I mean, when we were adopting through Ethiopia, we were intentionally interested in finding a church that was multicultural, because we looked around the congregation of the church we were sitting in, and every single person looked exactly as we did. And we were going to have a daughter who was going to have black skin. And the idea of like putting yourself into community, I walked in to this church unbelievably naively thinking I had a handle on race. And I left this church appreciating that I will never fully have an understanding on race, but that I'm closer now to appreciating notions of privilege and the difference in how my life experience and their life experience, and in anyone who has any kind of experience different than mine as a white, male, straight, American human might. Like, I got this tattoo. It's the word ally. Like, I got it on my arm so that my boys would remember to never, ever not use the opportunity to stand alongside someone who doesn't have as much access to a stage or as loud a voice or as much representation inside of a room because of like the fortune of just having been born a certain way. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's something that, like, again, the like younger version of me growing up in a super homogenous part of South Orange County where I never really was exposed to anything that was different. I just thought everything showed up for everyone in the same way, and appreciating that not everything shows up for everyone in the same way has been, an eye-opening thing that I think is part of the work that we're trying to accomplish in the work we're doing now.
And I think this is a conversation that we could probably talk for more hours, many more hours on.
That's true.
It's very powerful. It's very important that our life experience is not everybody else's life experience. And when you get exposure to other people's life experiences, you build empathy and more understanding of the situation. So before you make false assumptions, get some exposure, talk to people. It's very important.
Here's the one other thing I would just say, because I think it's like fundamentally changed the way I think about who I choose to spend time with. And it's not my line. It's such a like borrowed from other people line, but you are the 5 people you spend the most time with. Like I have not given enough time or thought to how intentional I was with the circle I was in until just the last couple of years of time. If you are the smartest person in your circle, the most driven person in your circle, the person who's got the strongest faith, the person, whatever it might be, you're in the wrong circle. Right? You will never become a better version of yourself unless you put yourself in a circle of people who can challenge you to become better than you are. And so this is a long way around to a question about how some experience in life changed the way that you thought about, this, that, or the other thing. But I've had more experiences in the last 2 years that have made me think differently about how I think because of having made intentional choices about who I'm spending time with. If you are in circles with people that are going to be threatened by your ambition, mediocre people are always going to try and pull exceptional people back down to mediocre. Whereas if you surround yourself with exceptional people, they're going to challenge you to become more exceptional. And so you have to do a bit of an inventory on who you're spending time with and whether they're feeding you and fueling you or if they're keeping you from being the better version of you.
And to expand just a little bit further, some of the people in our lives on a sliding scale, rating them, are going to be negatives. They are going to bring your average down simply by being a part of your life. This is the reality of the world. It's sad to say that there are people that sabotage. There are people that aren't happy in their own lives and they bring you down for whatever reasons that they have. But so just eliminating those people from your life causes the average to go up, and then start actively searching for people who don't have that negative value, and your life has the potential to change. It can't be understated the impact that can have on your life.
I mean, it's a huge thing, and it's easy to say, but it's hard. Sometimes those people are really important people, but if someone has a problem with you being a better version of yourself, they're not a person that you should have sitting in the front row of your life. I mean, too often we give people in the cheap seats front row access, and it's just I mean, it's the recipe for absolutely not getting to the next level or being the better version of yourself. So.
And if you were to ask me something that I used to believe, only to reverse course, it would be that I think the saying that blood is thicker than water was made up by crappy relatives.
Yeah.
In order to keep you closer. That saying never would have been created if somebody was awesome. There would never have been a need, right? So that saying, I don't buy it. I'm selling that entire saying.
Yeah, I joke when we get to the holidays, like you're going into a situation where you're committed to a diet, and you've got this aunt who just wants to eat double servings of mashed potatoes and gravy, and you revert sometimes in those situations back to the roles that you play every time you're with family. Sometimes you've got to decide that your aunt making you feel bad about only having salad at Thanksgiving is a reflection of her insecurity of not having reached for a better choice than it is an indictment on you wanting to be healthy. Get rid of Aunt Pam. It's fine, right?
Sorry, Aunt Pam. So if you could share one truth with the world, and I know we've talked about a lot of them in this conversation, what would it be? If people could understand one thing, what would that one thing be?
Oh my goodness. One thing. I mean, I'm coming out of a season where letting go of the worry of what other people think has been the most liberating and important choice I could have made. So, just the idea that other people's opinions are none of your business, that like criticism, though constructive criticism is always going to be important, but like criticism is unavoidable. So if you want to avoid it, do nothing, say nothing, be nothing. I mean, I put it up today as a post, so it's on my mind, but like, you've got to be comfortable living fully into who you are and how you were created without worry of what other people think, or you will never live a fulfilled life.
I love it. It's very, very important. Final thing, where can my audience find you on the World Wide Webs?
Well, on Instagram, you can follow me at Mr. Dave Hollis. Follow my wife. It's my dang business. Ms. MS Rachel Hollis. Our company is the Hollis Company. If you go onto Insta, there's a what do you call it? Whatever it is on Instagram, the Hollis Company. It has all the info. What's the little ampersand? Is that what it is? It doesn't matter. Follow us. Follow us there. We've got a couple of cool podcasts that I think deliver some really great value on the regular. There's a podcast called Rise that my wife hosts on Tuesdays, and a podcast called Rise Together that we host together on Thursdays. Check those out, and thanks for having me. I really, really appreciate being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I know that relationships are the most important thing we do, and you guys absolutely kill it with providing value on how to improve your relationships with the people that matter the most, which should be the top priority in our lives. So thank you. It's my pleasure having you on the show. Next time on The Process, I have with me Jeff Imptman, the host of the hit podcast Here Be Monsters.
My son was up in front, and most of the time people wouldn't pick me up if there were kids in the car because, I don't know, it's like fair enough, But I was talking to him, he's like, I used to live in Hawaii, and like I was in a gang there, and I did something that they didn't like. And so me and him talking to his kid, and it's like we just picked up and moved to Missouri overnight. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't imagine doing that. And then I was like, behind the driver's seat. I was just kind of resting my arm over the thing. And I was like, the whole time you've been telling me this, I've been kind of like absentmindedly like manipulating this little case. I started thinking about it. I was like, what actually, this is a weird shape. What is this? And it was just totally a machete. It was just like the sheath of a machete.
If you have not yet subscribed to The Process Podcast, please click that little subscribe button or head to mentallyinvincible.com/The Process and join our email newsletter, because this is not a conversation you want to miss.